Lady Grey's haunted parlour. It began with the tea, as all things do in my life. I'd brewed a perfect pot of Earl Grey, steeped precisely 4 minutes, the way my dear departed grandmother had taught me. The china cup was warm in my hand, the steam curling lazily in the air. The fire in the grate hissed and popped, casting long shadows that danced on the walls. It should have been a quiet evening, a night to sip, reflect, and perhaps outline a new story for my channel. But then, something strange happened. It started with the smell, an unfamiliar scent, earthy and damp, like freshly turned soil. At first, I thought perhaps a draught had stirred from the cellar, carrying with it the sense of old stone and forgotten corners. But no, this was different. It smelled wrong, as though the ground itself had been disturbed, letting something crawl free from beneath it. I set my tea down and glanced around the parlour, my skin prickling with the weight of being watched. The shadows had stopped dancing. The fire crackled, but the air was heavy, too still, as if the room were waiting for something. And then from the hall the clock struck. 1, 2, 3, that clock. Oh, it always finds its way into the strangest moments. It's an old thing, as stubborn as it is temperamental, and lately it had taken to chiming at odd hours. But this time was different. The chime was low, too low, as if muffled beneath layers of time. It sent a ripple of unease down my spine. That's when I heard it, a soft rustle like silk sliding over wood. It came from behind me, so faint, so deliberate. I froze, my heart thudding against my ribs. Slowly I turned toward the sound, and there, just at the edge of the parlour, stood a figure. At first I thought it might be the reflection of the firelight playing tricks on my eyes, but no, it was a woman in black, draped in tattered lace and with her head tilted ever so slightly to the side, as if considering me. I couldn't see her face clearly. It seemed blurred, like a watercolour painting left out in the rain. But her eyes, oh, those eyes. They locked onto mine, dark, sharp and knowing, like she had waited for me a very long time. "Lady Grey," she whispered. Her voice wasn't carried by the air. It slithered, low and intimate, right inside my mind. I felt it curl around my thoughts like smoke, wrapping me in the chill of her presence. And then she was gone. Just gone. One blink, and the space she had occupied was empty, as though she had never stood there at all. The logical part of me wanted to dismiss it, fatigue perhaps, or an overactive imagination stirred by too many ghost stories. But something deeper, something instinctive, whispered that this was not the sort of vision one brushes aside. I stood for a moment, teacup in hand, uncertain whether to sit back down or investigate. I chose the latter, of course. Wouldn't you? The hall beyond the parlour stretched into darkness, the only light coming from the flickering fire behind me. As I approached the grandfather clock, I noticed the pendulum had stopped, though I had wound it just the day before. Odd. I reached out to nudge it back into motion, but the instant my hand touched the brass, I felt a jolt, a cold sting that shot through my fingertips and up my arm, like the shock of distant lightning. And that's when the door to the clock swung open. Inside the small compartment at the base of the clock was something that most certainly had not been there before, a folded scrap of yellowed paper. I hesitated only a moment before pulling it free, my breath shallow and sharp in the still air. Unfolding it, I found a single word scrawled in a frantic hand. "Come." I wish I could tell you I hesitated. I wish I could say I was wise enough to throw the paper into the fire and put this whole strange business behind me. But curiosity is a relentless companion, and it pulls at me like the tide. I grabbed my coat, slipped a lantern from its hook by the door, and made my way outside into the night. The garden, normally so peaceful, seemed twisted under the moonlight, every branch a claw, every shadow a threat. And there at the far end of the path I saw her again, the woman in black. She stood by the garden gate, her form more solid now but still blurred at the edges, as though she existed only halfway between this world and the next. Without a word, she turned and slipped through the gate, her lace skirts trailing behind her. I followed. Down the winding path we went, deeper into the woods that bordered my home. The lantern's glow flickered with each step, as if protesting the journey. But I couldn't stop. I was drawn, compelled, as if the forest itself whispered my name through the rustling leaves. Finally, we came to a clearing, and there she stood, waiting. Her hand lifted, pointing toward a small, moss-covered stone set into the ground. Carved into its surface was my name, Lady Grey. The air grew thick and oppressive, pressing down on my chest like a heavy curtain. She knelt beside the stone and began to scratch at the earth with her fingers, her movements feverish and urgent. I could only watch, helpless, as she unearthed something buried beneath the moss and soil. A small antique mirror. She held it up to me, her dark eyes gleaming with triumph. And then, slowly, she smiled. A thin, knowing smile that chilled me to the bone. "Look," she whispered. I did. And in the reflection, I saw not myself, but her, standing in my parlor, holding my teacup, with a wicked grin spreading across her blurred face. And that's when I realized I wasn't following her into the woods. She had led me out. I'm still out here, somewhere in the cold, holding this mirror. I don't know how to get back, or if I even can. But if you're watching this, if you've made it this far, consider yourself warned. The woman in black, she's waiting for you too. And if you hear your name whispered in the dark, well, best not follow, my darling. But do stop by the parlor for tea sometime, won't you? She'll be expecting you.